He thought shredding my compliance file would make everything disappear. He was wrong. What he destroyed was the only thing keeping this company on the right side of federal law. The certifications, the permits, the signatures that kept a $120 million operation from becoming a crime scene. And now it's not just me watching. The FBI is circling like vultures over roadkill. You think he'll walk away from this? Keep watching. My name is Rachel Whitman, and for 15 years, I was the invisible shield between Brixton Therapeutics and federal prison. Not that anyone ever thanked me for it. I managed 53 active permits across FDA, DEA, and EPA jurisdictions, each one a ticking time bomb if mishandled, each one requiring my personal certification, my signature, my accountability, the kind of responsibility that wakes you up at 3:30 in the morning, checking emails to make sure some eager intern didn't accidentally invalidate a manufacturing license worth $40 million. Then Ethan Cole walked through our doors. 32 years old, Wharton MBA, and the new CFO's favorite talking point at board meetings. They called him a optimization specialist. I called him what he was, a corporate executioner with a spreadsheet. Our first meeting was on a Tuesday. I remember because the Denver skyline was particularly gray that morning, matching the mood in Conference Room B. Ethan sat at the head of the table, my usual spot, flipping through his tablet with the casual arrogance of someone who'd never had to explain a compliance violation to federal investigators. "Rachel," he said, not looking up, "I've been reviewing your department's operational efficiency metrics." I sipped my coffee, black, no sugar, the same way I'd taken it for 2 decades. And? "Frankly, they're concerning. You're running at 60% capacity with twice the headcount of similar departments at our competitors." Similar departments, as if any other pharmaceutical company had our unique web of grandfathered permits, special exemptions, and conditional approvals I'd negotiated over the years, as if compliance was just another line item to optimize. Those metrics don't account for. "We need to talk about restructuring." He finally looked at me then, and I saw it, that particular gleam in the eye of every young executive who thinks experience is just another word for obsolete. Operational streamlining, we're calling it. I nodded slowly, setting down my mug with deliberate care. In that moment, I made 2 decisions. First, I would play along with whatever corporate theater he had planned. Second, I would start backing up every single permit, certificate, and federal filing onto my personal encrypted drive. Call it paranoia. Call it 15 years of watching good people get steamrolled by bad management. But something in Ethan's smile told me this wasn't about efficiency, this was about replacement. And when you've been the gatekeeper as long as I have, you learn to recognize when someone's measuring you for a coffin. "I'm happy to discuss improvements," I said, matching his plastic smile with one of my own. After all, compliance is about adaptation. He had no idea how true that was, or how much I was about to adapt. That night, I stayed until 11:45, methodically copying files, documenting access codes, and most importantly, reviewing every single contract I'd signed on behalf of the company. That's when I found it. Section 7C of my original employment agreement, buried in subsection after subsection of legal jargon, a clause I'd insisted on 15 years ago, when Brixton was desperate for someone with my federal connections. The right to revoke all personal certifications upon involuntary termination. I leaned back in my chair, staring at those beautiful, boring words. Ethan Cole thought he was hunting. He didn't realize he'd just walked into my territory. And I'd been here a very, very long time. The Operational Streamlining Initiative launched 3 weeks later with all the subtlety of a wrecking ball. Ethan held a company-wide meeting at 9 in the morning sharp, complete with PowerPoint slides featuring words like synergy and optimization and right-sizing. I sat in the back row, watching my colleagues' faces transition from confusion to concern to barely concealed panic as he outlined his vision. 30% workforce reduction, departmental consolidation, leveraging technology to eliminate redundancies. "Of course," Ethan said, his laser pointer dancing across a particularly dense flowchart. "We're not just cutting, we're investing in the future. bringing in fresh talent with cutting-edge skill sets. Fresh talent. That afternoon, I met her. Kara Morrison, 23 years old, straight out of state college with a business degree and the kind of aggressive enthusiasm that mistakes ignorance for innovation. Ethan introduced her as my collaborative partner in the transition. "I'm so excited to learn from you," Kara gushed, shaking my hand with both of hers. "Ethan says you know everything about permits and stuff." Permits and stuff. I watched her struggle to pronounce pharmacovigilance during our first meeting and wondered if she even knew what CDER stood for. But I smiled, nodded, and began teaching her the basics while quietly documenting every interaction. The pattern became clear within days. Kara would shadow me in the morning, ask superficial questions, then report to Ethan after lunch. I'd see them through his glass office walls, her gesturing enthusiastically while he took notes on his tablet, building their case. Meanwhile, I was building something else entirely. Every night, I stayed late, systematically creating what I called my insurance policy. Not just copying files now, creating a complete shadow system, backup authentication protocols, alternative approval pathways, a hidden administrative access that would survive even if my main credentials were revoked. The beauty was in the complexity. Brixton's compliance infrastructure was like a massive game of Jenga I'd assembled piece by piece over 15 years. Every permit referenced others, every certification built on previous approvals. Pull the right piece, and the whole tower would collapse. The fourth week, things accelerated. My access to the primary federal filing system was temporarily reassigned to allow Kara to practice in a supervised environment. My parking spot, the one I'd earned after a decade of service, was suddenly needed for visitor accessibility. My name disappeared from the compliance department's email signature block, replaced by compliance team in generic Arial font. "It's just streamlining," Ethan explained during what he called a touch-base meeting on a Friday afternoon. "Nothing personal. Rachel, we need to present a unified front to regulators." I nodded thoughtfully. "Of course, unity is important. Speaking of which, I should probably review all the permits that have my personal certification attached, just to ensure a smooth transition." A flicker of something, concern, suspicion, crossed his face. "Is that necessary?" "Oh, absolutely. Federal guidelines require notification if the certifying officer changes. I'd hate for us to be non-compliant because of an administrative oversight." I pulled out my phone, pretending to check my calendar. "I can have a full audit ready by Monday." "That's very proactive of you." "Well, you know what they say. Compliance is about staying ahead of problems, not reacting to them." That weekend, I worked 43 hours straight, fueled by coffee and cold determination, not just documenting now, architecting, creating a framework that would let me pull every certification with a single action, a dead man's switch for corporate permits. By Sunday night at 11:59, I had everything in place: 53 permits, 27 special exemptions, 12 conditional approvals, all tied to my personal certification under federal law, all revocable under Section 7C of my employment agreement. Monday morning, I arrived at 7:30 to find my desk had been moved, not to another office, to a cubicle in the basement, next to the server room, a sticky note on my monitor in Kara's bubbly handwriting. "Hope you like your new space. It's so much quieter down here for focus work." I sat down, powered up my computer, and smiled. They thought they were demoting me. In reality, they'd just given me physical access to the servers. Ethan had no idea what he'd started, but he was about to learn that in compliance, as in war, position matters less than knowledge. And I knew where all the bodies were buried. The basement became my kingdom of obsolescence, while Ethan paraded his transformation success to the board upstairs. I sat among the humming servers and flickering fluorescent lights, watching the comedy of errors unfold through my monitor. Kara's first solo filing with the FDA was a masterpiece of incompetence. She'd submitted our quarterly adverse event report with the wrong product codes, essentially telling the federal government we were manufacturing cardiac stents instead of antibiotics. The correction took me 6 hours and a personal phone call to my contact at the agency, a relationship I'd cultivated for 12 years. "Thanks so much for fixing that," Kara chirped, appearing at my cubicle with a Starbucks cup that probably cost more than my hourly rate had become. "Ethan says I'm learning so fast. He thinks I'll be ready to handle everything independently by next quarter." "That's wonderful," I said, saving the email chain documenting her error to my personal archive. "Quick question. Do you know what REMS stands for?" She blinked. "Rams? Like the football team?" Risk Evaluation and Mitigation Strategies, a fundamental concept in pharmaceutical compliance. I made a note in my documentation log and smiled. "Close enough. You'll get there." The morning briefings had become spectacular displays of corporate delusion. Ethan would present charts showing efficiency gains while conveniently ignoring the 3 warning letters we'd received from state regulators about filing delays. The new interns, hired at 40% of my team's former salaries, would nod enthusiastically and take notes on their iPads, not realizing they were documenting their own incompetence. Rachel's legacy processes were holding us back. I heard Ethan tell Gerald Drake, our CEO, during a chance encounter by the elevator. "But we're modernizing rapidly. The new team is hungry, agile, innovative." Gerald, who spent most of his time on his yacht and couldn't tell a 483 observation from a hole in the ground, clapped Ethan on the shoulder. "That's what I like to hear. Keep cutting that fat." Fat. 15 years of keeping this company out of federal prison, reduced to metabolic waste. That night, I discovered something interesting in the server logs. Ethan had been accessing my old files, specifically the compliance records from 2018 through 2020. But here's the thing about Ethan. He thought digital meant deletable. He didn't understand that in pharma compliance, destruction of records wasn't just firing a fence, it was a federal crime. I watched through the system logs as he systematically purged my documentation, replacing detailed audit trails with simplified, streamlined protocols that wouldn't pass a first-year regulatory review. Each deletion was time-stamped, user-authenticated, and backed up to my shadow system. "You're still here?" I looked up to find Marcus Chen from IT standing in my cubicle entrance, one of the few old-timers left, though his name was already on Ethan's optimization list for next quarter. "Just wrapping up some documentation," I said carefully. He glanced around, then leaned closer. "Word of advice? Whatever you're planning, do it soon. Ethan's moving up the timeline. They're announcing the next round of restructuring at Friday's All Hands. 3 days." I thanked Marcus and turned back to my screen, pulling up Section 7C one more time. The language was clear. Upon involuntary termination, the undersigned retains the right to withdraw all personal certifications issued on behalf of the company, effective immediately upon written notice. The beauty wasn't just in the clause itself, it was in how our permits were structured. Each one specifically named me as the certifying officer, not my title, not the department. Me, Rachel Whitman, personally liable under federal law for their accuracy. Thursday evening at 6:45, I sent a single email to my personal attorney. Subject line: Preparation for potential employment action. The message was brief, professional, and included one key attachment: a complete inventory of every certification tied to my name. Her response came within an hour. "Understood. Standing by." Friday morning arrived gray and drizzling, Denver's weather matching the mood inside Brixton's conference room. Ethan stood at the podium, his Workforce Optimization Phase 2 presentation glowing behind him. I sat in my usual back row spot, notepad in hand, pen poised. "Before we begin," Ethan said, his smile sharp enough to cut glass, "I want to thank everyone who's embraced our journey toward operational excellence. Change isn't easy, but it's necessary for growth." He clicked to the next slide. A list of names appeared. Mine was third from the top. "These individuals have been selected for our Transition Assistance Program. We thank them for their service and wish them well in their future endeavors." Around me, people shifted uncomfortably. A few turned to look at me with sympathy, pity, or relief that their names weren't on the screen. I kept my expression neutral, professional. Inside, I was calculating. T-minus 24 hours until detonation. Ethan had just lit the fuse. He simply didn't know it yet. The termination meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. They gave me 4 hours to wrap up any urgent matters before security would escort me out. 4 hours to conclude 15 years, the arithmetic of corporate cruelty. I spent those hours in plain sight, performing the most dangerous kind of sabotage, following protocol to the letter. First, I sent a routine notification to our FDA contact about updating certifying officer information. Standard procedure, nothing alarming, just a heads up that some paperwork might be coming through. I CC'd Kara, who replied all with, "Thanks, Rachel. I'll handle this going forward." Next, I accessed the permit database one last time through my still active credentials. Everything looked normal on the surface. Green lights across the board. What didn't show was the invisible countdown I'd embedded weeks ago. A simple authentication check that would trigger in exactly 24 hours, searching for my personal certification. When it didn't find it, the dominoes would fall. Busy bee, aren't we? Ethan stood at my cubicle entrance, hands in his pockets, radiating the casual confidence of someone who'd never been held personally liable for a federal violation. "Just ensuring a smooth transition," I said, not looking up from my screen. "I'm documenting all active permits for Kara. Wouldn't want any surprises." "That's very thorough of you." He stepped closer, peering at my monitor. "Though I'm sure Kara has everything under control. She's been shadowing you for weeks." Of course, I pulled up a complex, multi-state distribution permit. "I'm sure she explained to you how this one interfaces with the DEA's ARCOS system and the quarterly reconciliation requirements?" His smile faltered slightly. "The details aren't really my department." "No," I agreed. "They're mine, or they were." At 1:55, I printed a single document, my termination acknowledgement form, pre-filled with HR's boilerplate language about company property and non-disclosure agreements. Standard stuff, except for the addendum I'd attached, a formal notice of certification withdrawal under Section 7C. The HR representative, a nervous young man named Tyler, barely glanced at it as I signed. "Thank you for making this easy," he mumbled, sliding the severance package across the table. "Your final check will be direct deposited, and COBRA information will be mailed." "Tyler," I interrupted gently, "you did file this with legal, right? The certification withdrawal?" He blinked. "The what?" "The addendum about my federal certifications. It's time sensitive." "Oh, I'll make sure it gets to them." He wouldn't. I knew that. But I'd followed procedure, provided written notice. The timestamp on the email I'd sent to legal, 1:58 p.m., would be evidence enough. At 2:15, security arrived. Not the friendly guards I'd known for years, but 2 contractors Ethan had hired. Efficiency experts, in black polos, who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. I packed my personal items slowly, methodically, a coffee mug from the 2019 compliance conference, a photo from my team's last Christmas party, before Ethan had optimized them out of existence, a small cactus that had somehow survived 15 years of fluorescent lighting. "We need to move along," one of the guards said. Of course, I picked up my box, took one last look at my cubicle, and smiled. "Gentlemen, shall we?" The walk to the exit felt longer than usual. We passed the lab where technicians were preparing Monday's production run, permits for which would expire in 22 hours. We passed the shipping dock where $40 million of product waited for distribution, under licenses about to evaporate. We passed Ethan's office, where he was already celebrating with Kara and the other innovators. At the security desk, I surrendered my badge to the guard I'd said good morning to for 15 years. "Take care, Rachel," he said quietly. "You too, Jim. You might want to update that resume." Outside, Denver's afternoon sun had broken through the clouds. I sat in my car for a moment, watching the Brixton building in my rearview mirror. Somewhere in there, Ethan was probably already converting my cubicle into a storage closet. Kara was likely posting on LinkedIn about her expanded responsibilities. Gerald was certainly on a conference call from his yacht, oblivious to the storm bearing down on his company. My phone buzzed. A text from my attorney. Filing received and documented. Timer starting now. 23 hours and 52 minutes until impact. I started my car and drove away from Brixton Therapeutics for the last time, leaving behind 15 years of work and one perfectly legal time bomb. Ethan thought he'd eliminated a costly redundancy. In reality, he'd just pulled the pin on a grenade. The fuse was lit. All that remained was the explosion. Saturday passed in deliberate normalcy. I went to the farmer's market, bought overpriced tomatoes, pretended to care about the Rockies game on TV. But every few hours, I'd check my phone. No panicked calls yet. The beauty of a 24-hour delay. It guaranteed the explosion would happen during Monday's business hours, when every federal agency was fully staffed and watching. Sunday evening at 11:59, I sat in my home office with a glass of wine, watching the seconds tick down on my laptop. The certification withdrawal would process automatically at 2:15 Monday afternoon, exactly 24 hours after I'd signed the papers. But the real fireworks would start Monday morning, when Brixton's systems performed their routine federal database sync. My phone rang at 6:42 Monday morning. Unknown number. Denver area code. Rachel? Thank God. It was Marcus from IT, whispering. The system's going insane. Every permit in the database is showing invalid. Kara's in tears. Ethan's screaming at everyone. And, Marcus, I'm no longer a Brixton employee. I can't. They're saying it's a glitch, but I can see the logs. Your name's been removed from every certification. How is that even possible? Section 7C of my employment agreement, I said calmly. I retained personal liability for all certifications. When I withdrew my authorization, they became invalid. Silence. Then, holy shit! By 8 in the morning, my phone was buzzing nonstop. I let them all go to voicemail, focusing instead on preparing breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, coffee strong enough to strip paint, the simple pleasures of unemployment. The first voicemail was from Kara, hysteria bleeding through her professional tone. Hi, Rachel. Hope you're enjoying your, time off. Quick question about the FDA permits. They're showing some kind of error and I can't figure out. The second came from Ethan at 9:23. Rachel, we need to discuss your exit paperwork. There seems to be some confusion about intellectual property transfer. Call me immediately. The third, at 10:15, was from legal. Ms. Whitman, this is David Reeves, General Counsel. We've received your Section 7C notice. We need to discuss this urgently. This action could have serious implications. Yes, David, that was rather the point. By noon, the situation had escalated beyond voicemails. A courier arrived with a cease and desist letter demanding I restore all certifications immediately. I signed for it politely, filed it in my evidence folder, and returned to my lunch. At 1:35, Gerald Drake himself called. The CEO, who hadn't spoken to me directly in 3 years, suddenly remembered my name. Rachel, Gerald Drake here. I'm sure we can work something out. This whole situation is clearly a misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding. Mr. Drake, I was terminated, per my employment agreement. I withdrew my personal certifications. It's all quite straightforward. But the entire operation, we can't ship product, we can't manufacture, we can't even... I'm aware. The FDA is threatening to shut us down. They're not threatening, Mr. Drake. Without valid permits, you're already shut down. You're just operating illegally at the moment. Silence stretched between us before he spoke again, voice tight. What do you want? Nothing. I don't work for Brixton anymore, remember? Ethan made sure of that. We could discuss a consulting arrangement, temporary, just to resolve this. My consulting rate is $15,000 per day, with a 90-day minimum commitment paid up front. He choked. That's extortion. That's market rate for emergency federal compliance remediation. Check with any firm in the country. Actually, I'm giving you a discount. I'm not charging my usual crisis premium. This is insane. You've destroyed the company over a termination. I followed every legal requirement. Mr. Drake, your team had weeks to prepare for this transition. Kara assured everyone she was ready. Ethan guaranteed the board that his streamlined processes would improve efficiency. I'm sure they have everything under control. Another pause. Rachel, please, we have orders worth $40 million that ship tomorrow. You had orders worth $40 million. Without valid permits. Those are just very expensive boxes taking up warehouse space. At 2:15 exactly, my laptop chimed. A simple notification. Certification withdrawal complete. Somewhere across Denver, Brixton Therapeutics had just become a criminal enterprise. Every pill manufactured, every box shipped, every form filed, all federal violations punishable by fines that would make Gerald's yacht seem like a bathtub toy. My phone rang again. This time, I recognized the number. My former FDA contact, Dr. Patricia Hayward. Rachel, she said without preamble. What the hell is happening at Brixton? We're getting system alerts about massive permit violations. I no longer work there. Patricia, I withdrew my certifications as per my employment agreement. You withdrew 53 active permits? Do you have any idea what that means? It means Brixton needs to file for new certifications with a qualified officer. I submitted the withdrawal notice per federal guidelines. Everything was done by the book. She laughed, short and sharp. By the book, Rachel, you just turned a pharmaceutical company into a narcotics trafficking operation. Every controlled substance in their inventory is now illegal. Then they should probably stop shipping product. They don't know. Their new compliance officer, Kara something, just told my inspector that this was a computer glitch that would be fixed by IT. I close my eyes, even now. They didn't understand. Patricia, I need you to document that they were informed of the violation and continued operations. Way ahead of you. We're sending a team there now. After we hung up, I sat in the silence of my home office, staring at the laptop screen. Somewhere, federal agents were descending on Brixton. Somewhere, Ethan was probably still insisting this could be fixed with a PowerPoint presentation. Somewhere, Kara was learning that permits and stuff actually mattered. The second wave would hit tomorrow, when their corporate clients discovered their supply chain had been compromised. Then the shareholders, then the SEC. All from one signature on a termination form. Ethan had wanted to eliminate redundancies. He just hadn't realized that in compliance. I wasn't a redundancy. I was a load-bearing wall. And he'd just knocked it down. Tuesday morning's news cycle hit Brixton like a tsunami. Pharmaceutical giant operating without federal permits ran across the business section of the Denver Post. By 10 in the morning, it had been picked up by Reuters, Bloomberg, and the Wall Street Journal. I watched the coverage from my couch, eating cereal while Brixton's stock price performed a spectacular nosedive. 23% drop at market open, trading halted by 10:30. My phone had become a symphony of desperation. 37 missed calls from Brixton numbers, 14 text messages ranging from threats to bribes, 3 FedEx attempts to deliver what I assumed were legal documents I had no obligation to accept. The most interesting call came at 2 in the afternoon, not from Brixton, but from my friend at Johnson & Johnson. Rachel, are you watching this massacre? I'm aware of the situation. Aware? You architected it. It's brilliant. Also, I'm calling to offer you a job. I'm listening. Senior VP of Global Compliance. Full relocation package. Signing bonus that would make your eyes water. We need someone who understands federal regulations at a molecular level. Send me the details. I'm considering all options. Wednesday brought the client exodus. Mercy Health Systems, Brixton's largest customer, terminated their $120 million contract citing inability to fulfill federal requirements. The dominoes kept falling. Kaiser, Advent Health, Cleveland Clinic. Each cancellation meant millions in penalties Brixton would have to pay. Gerald Drake finally cracked Thursday morning. Not a phone call this time. He showed up at my house at 7:45. Standing on my porch in a wrinkled suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. We need to talk, he said when I opened the door. "We're talking." "May I come in?" "No." He deflated slightly. "Rachel, the FDA has frozen all our inventory. The DEA is conducting a criminal investigation. We've lost 60% of our market cap. The board is calling for my resignation." "Sounds like you should have thought about that before letting Ethan play CEO." "Ethan's been terminated." I raised an eyebrow. "Optimized out?" "This isn't funny. People's medications are being fulfilled by your competitors who maintained proper compliance standards. No patient has been harmed. Gerald, just your profit margins." He pulled out an envelope. "Consulting agreement, $20,000 a day, 6-month minimum, full reinstatement of your previous authority plus a senior VP title." "Too late." $30,000. "Gerald, you don't understand. It's not about money anymore. You let a child with a spreadsheet destroy 15 years of my work. You sat on your yacht while he dismantled the infrastructure that kept your company legal. And when I warned you, yes, I sent you emails, all documented. You ignored them." His face had gone pale. "What emails?" "The ones about compliance concerns, system vulnerabilities, the risks of removing experienced personnel, all sent to your corporate account, all unread, according to the delivery receipts." "I never—" "Check with Ethan. He had your IT access, didn't he? Part of his efficiency improvements? He probably deleted them to keep you from getting worried about his brilliant restructuring." I watched realization dawn on his face. The CEO who'd given a 32-year-old unlimited power to optimize operations was beginning to understand the cost. "The FBI contacted us this morning," he said quietly. "They're investigating potential fraud charges related to the permit situation." "I'm aware. They called me yesterday. I'm meeting with them Monday as a witness." "Rachel, go home. Gerald, call your lawyers. Real ones. Not the corporate yes-men who let this happen. And maybe next time you run a pharmaceutical company, remember that some redundancies exist for a reason." He stood there for another moment. This captain of industry who'd discovered his ship had no bottom. Then he turned and walked back to his Mercedes, each step heavier than the last. Friday's headlines were even better. Brixton Therapeutics under federal investigation. Former compliance officer's departure triggers corporate meltdown. My personal favorite, how one employee's exit destroyed a billion-dollar company. Ethan Cole's name featured prominently in every article. LinkedIn showed he'd updated his status to seeking new opportunities. Good luck with that, kid. His name was now synonymous with the most spectacular compliance failure in pharmaceutical history. At 4:30 that afternoon, Patricia from the FDA called again. "Thought you'd want to know," she said. "We've officially red-flagged Brixton. Full shutdown until they can demonstrate compliance. Estimated timeline for reinstatement is 18 to 24 months, if they survive." Will they? Honestly, between the client lawsuits, federal fines, and shareholder litigation, I'd be surprised if they last 6 months. Their board's already in talks with Novartis about a fire sale acquisition. After we hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine and stood at my window, watching the sun set over the Rockies. Somewhere out there, a billion-dollar company was burning to the ground because they'd thought experience was expendable, because they'd believed efficiency trumped expertise, because they'd let a boy with a PowerPoint play with federal regulations. My laptop chimed. New email from Orion Biosystems, Brixton's biggest competitor. Subject line, urgent consulting opportunity. I smiled and took another sip of wine. The market, it seemed, was finally learning to value proper compliance. And I was about to be very, very expensive. Monday morning, 8 sharp, FBI field office, downtown Denver. Special Agent Sarah Collins sat across from me in a conference room that smelled like burnt coffee and legal pads. She was maybe 35, with the kind of focused intensity that suggested she'd been waiting for a case like this. "Ms. Whitman, thank you for coming in voluntarily. Before we begin, you're not under investigation. We consider you a cooperating witness." "I understand." She opened a thick folder. "Can you explain your role at Brixton Therapeutics?" For the next 3 hours, I walked her through everything, The permits, the certifications, the systematic dismantling of the compliance infrastructure. I'd brought copies of everything: emails, system logs, the famous Section 7C, even screenshots of Ethan's deleted files. "This is comprehensive," Agent Collins said, flipping through the documentation. "Almost like you were expecting this." When you work in compliance for 15 years, Agent Collins, you learn to document everything. It's not paranoia if they really are trying to eliminate your position. And this Ethan Cole? He directly ordered the deletion of federal compliance records? I have system logs showing his user ID accessing and deleting files on 3 separate occasions. Each deletion violated federal record-keeping requirements. That's 5 years per violation, I believe. She smiled slightly. "You've done your homework." "I also have this." I pulled out my final piece of evidence, a printed email chain from 2 weeks before my termination. Ethan discussing with Gerald Drake how they could save $3 million annually by eliminating compliance redundancies and managing permits internally without dedicated oversight. Agent Collins studied the emails. They put this in writing? Efficiency experts often confuse confidence with competence. Tuesday's news broke just after lunch. FBI raids at Brixton headquarters, agents carrying out boxes of documents, Gerald Drake doing the perp walk in handcuffs, trying to shield his face from cameras. The imagery was devastating. But the real bombshell came Wednesday. Ethan Cole, attempting to save himself, had turned state's evidence. Unfortunately for him, he'd also inadvertently confessed to willful destruction of federal documents during his recorded interview. My attorney called that afternoon. "The FBI wants to know if you'd consider serving as an expert witness if this goes to trial." "Tell them yes, pro bono." "Rachel, you could charge." "Some things are worth more than money." Thursday brought unexpected satisfaction in the form of a call from Marcus in IT, now former IT, as he'd wisely jumped ship to a startup. "Did you hear about Kara?" he asked. "What about her?" "She's been calling around, trying to find another compliance job. But word's out, she's radioactive. Nobody will touch someone who told federal inspectors that permit violations were just computer glitches. Choices have consequences. Also thought you should know, remaining staff are calling you the ghost, as in, you haunted them from beyond termination. I like that. The ghost of compliance past, present, and future. Friday afternoon, I finally returned one of the dozens of messages, not from Brixton, from Orion Biosystems. Their CEO, Diana Chen, had been personally calling twice daily. "Rachel, thank God. Have you seen what's happening to Brixton?" "I'm aware of the situation." "I'll cut to the chase. We want you. Senior VP of Global Compliance and Regulatory Affairs, 750 base, plus equity, corner office, full team building authority, no interference from finance, operations, or any other department. You report directly to me." "Interesting. What about your current compliance head?" "He saw what happened to Brixton and submitted his resignation yesterday. Said he'd rather leave on good terms than wait to be optimized. Smart man. Send me the package. I'll review it this weekend." "Rachel, can I be frank? Every pharma company in the country is terrified right now. They're auditing their compliance departments, checking employment agreements, making sure they don't have any Section 7C surprises waiting. You've become either their worst nightmare or their most valuable asset. I prefer to think of myself as a reminder." "Of what?" "That expertise has value, that regulations exist for reasons, that when you treat compliance as a cost center instead of a critical function, you don't just risk fines, you risk everything." After we hung up, I walked to my bookshelf and pulled down my worn copy of the Federal Register. 15 years of highlights, notes, post-its marking critical sections. Ethan had probably never opened one. Gerald certainly hadn't. They'd trusted algorithms and ambition over experience and expertise. My phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. I almost deleted it until I read the preview. "This is Kara Morrison. I know you probably hate me. Sss." I opened it fully. "But I wanted to say I'm sorry. I didn't understand what you were protecting us from. I thought I was ready. I wasn't. I destroyed my career and helped destroy the company. You tried to teach me, and I was too arrogant to listen. I'm sorry. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. Apology accepted. Word of advice. Go back to school. Get a real compliance certification. Start over at a small company where you can actually learn, and never, ever tell a federal inspector that violations are just glitches. Thank you. Also, how did you know this would happen? I didn't know. I just prepared for the possibility. That's what compliance really is. Kara, hope for the best, document for the worst, and always have a backup plan. Do you think I can salvage my career? I thought about it. Maybe, in about 10 years, if you're lucky, and if you never forget that in this industry, the regulations aren't suggestions. They're the only thing standing between a company and complete destruction. Outside my window, Denver's evening lights were beginning to twinkle. Somewhere in those lights, Brixton Therapeutics was dying. Somewhere, federal investigators were building cases. Somewhere, other executives were learning that when you fire the person who holds your corporate lifeline, you'd better make sure they can't take it with them. My laptop chimed. Email from Diana at Orion. The offer letter was attached. Everything she'd promised and more. I opened a new reply. Typing 2 words. I accept. Monday morning, I'd start building a new compliance empire, one that no ambitious young executive would ever dare to optimize. The ghost of compliance was ready to haunt a new home. 6 months later, I stood in my corner office at Orion Biosystems, watching the news coverage on my wall-mounted screen. The headline was almost poetic. Brixton Therapeutics files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The accompanying footage showed the last employees leaving the building, carrying cardboard boxes. Among them, I spotted Jim from security, still helping people to the exit, one final time. The parking lot, where I'd once had a reserved spot, was empty except for a few news vans. Gerald Drake had been indicted on 4 counts of securities fraud and conspiracy to violate federal pharmaceutical regulations. His yacht had been seized as part of asset forfeiture. Ethan Cole faced 12 counts of willful destruction of federal records and obstruction of justice. His LinkedIn now showed Federal Correctional Institution, Englewood, as his current position. My assistant knocked and entered. Ms. Whitman, the Wall Street Journal is here for your interview. Send them in. The reporter was young, eager, probably seeing Pulitzer possibilities in the Brixton story. Ms. Whitman, you've been called the woman who brought down Big Pharma and the most dangerous compliance officer in America. How do you respond to those characterizations? I prefer the woman who did her job. Everything that happened to Brixton was self-inflicted. I simply refuse to be complicit in their negligence. But surely you must have known that withdrawing those certifications would destroy the company? I leaned back in my chair. Real leather. Not the synthetic stuff from my basement cubicle days. Let me tell you something about compliance in the pharmaceutical industry. We're not the department that says no. We're the department that keeps everyone out of federal prison. When a company decides that's not valuable, they've already destroyed themselves. I just stopped enabling their delusion. What about the employees who lost their jobs? The shareholders who lost millions? What about the patients who could have been harmed by non-compliant drugs? What about the federal laws that exist for public safety? Brixton made a calculation that compliance was less important than profit margins. The market corrected that assumption. Rather harshly, some would say, the FDA doesn't do participation trophies, neither do I. After the interview, I returned to my real work. Orion's compliance department now employed 43 specialists across 7 divisions, each one trained, certified, and empowered to stop any process that violated regulations. Diana had kept her promise. No interference from other departments. My phone buzzed. A text from Patricia at the FDA. Saw the news? Drinks tonight to celebrate the official end of Brixton? Can't celebrate a company's death, but I'll drink to the lesson it taught the industry. That evening, I stood at the window again, Denver's lights spreading before me. The Brixton building was dark now, a corporate tombstone on the skyline, but around it, In dozens of other pharmaceutical companies, compliance departments were being expanded, funded, respected. My legacy wasn't destruction, it was education. Every CEO in the industry now understood that when you hire a chief compliance officer, you're not paying for paperwork, you're paying for survival. Every CFO knew that optimization had limits. Every eager young executive thought twice before suggesting cuts to regulatory departments. The ghost of Brixton haunted every boardroom where someone suggested treating compliance as overhead. A knock interrupted my thoughts. One of my new team members, fresh from her certification program, stood in the doorway. "Ms. Whitman, I'm staying late to finish the quarterly FDA submission. Wanted to make sure everything's perfect." "Good. Perfect is the minimum standard here. But don't stay too late. Exhausted people make mistakes." "Yes, ma'am. Also, is it true, about Brixton, that you brought down the whole company with one signature?" I turned from the window. What I did was withdraw my personal certifications as legally permitted under my employment agreement. What brought down Brixton was their decision to operate without valid federal permits. Never confuse cause with consequence. She nodded, eyes wide, and returned to her desk. Another true believer in the gospel of compliance. Another professional who understood that in our world, the pen wasn't just mightier than the sword, it was a nuclear weapon. My computer chimed. Email from an unknown sender. Subject line, "Thank you." I opened it cautiously. It was from a former Brixton employee, one of the researchers from the lab. "Ms. Whitman, you probably don't remember me, but I wanted to thank you. When Brixton collapsed, I was terrified, but the FDA investigation revealed they'd been pushing us to falsify stability data. Your actions didn't just punish corporate greed, they exposed crimes that could have killed people. I sleep better knowing there are people like you standing watch." I read it twice, then filed it in a folder labeled "Why We Fight." Outside, night had fallen completely. The Brixton building had vanished into darkness, but my reflection in the window burned bright. Behind me, the compliance department hummed with purposeful activity, guardians of the public trust, keepers of the federal flame. I'd started this journey in a basement cubicle, discarded like obsolete equipment. I'd ended it in a corner office, setting industry standards. But the real victory wasn't personal. It was the message now etched into pharmaceutical industry consciousness. Compliance isn't a cost center, it's a foundation. Remove it at your peril. Ethan Cole had wanted to optimize. Gerald Drake had wanted to maximize profits. They'd both learned that in the pharmaceutical industry, the only thing you maximize by cutting compliance is your federal sentence. I raised my coffee mug, the same one from that basement cubicle, my small reminder of the journey, in a silent toast to all the compliance officers out there, standing between their companies and catastrophe. The ghost of Brixton Therapeutics would haunt the industry forever, and I was perfectly fine with that. Thank you for listening to this story of corporate revenge and the power of knowing your worth. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If you enjoyed this tale of compliance becoming combat, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever witnessed corporate karma in action? Let me know in the comments.